My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Tyson Smith. It's June 12th, 2025, and we're at the Ricochet Wine in McMinnville. And Tyson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
First question, let's get started with why wine?
Why wine? It's a big, broad question. It can be easily answered. It can take a long time, too. Why wine? Why wine really directly connects to the story of my dad and the name of the brand and all the things that will probably come out later as we speak. But my dad loved wine. He didn't drink expensive wine. He just drank, but he liked his wine. And in his retirement, he decided he wanted to make wine, and because he had done home brewing for a long time and bought a kit and made some cooking wine. Wine that was just not, was okay. But then because of that connection to homebrewing, the next year he noticed that you could buy grapes from Eastern Washington through the homebrew shop, and buying some grapes and made some pretty passable, pretty good wine. And so that next year I decided to to go in with him and hang out. And it was basically hanging out, trying new things and experimenting, and him kind of like delving in, because he was a scientist. His background was pharmacology, and he was a teacher as well. He taught pharmacology at OHSU, and so he really loved kind of digging into and understanding what the intricacies of the grapes and expanding and making wine. And so that was fun. We did that for years. We would make wine together, and unfortunately he passed in 2018 kind of unexpectedly, and I had this history of just telling people I'm a winemaker. I make wine. Here's some of my wine. Friends would drink my wine, and I would share my wine, and mostly Eastern Washington reds. That's kind of what my dad loved. And I knew, and I realized pretty quickly at that point in time that I wasn't a winemaker. I hung out with my dad, and he made wine, and he told me what we were doing while we were doing it as the teacher that he was, but never really stuck. It was just kind of just came through, and I understood it in the moment. And we had started a Carmenere that year, and I wanted to finish it. And so after a few months of kind of that, that grief and moments of like after he passed, I kind of sat down like, okay, what am I going to do here? And I realized he kept copious notes of everything that he ever did, and that's why the brand name is what it is. Because as a scientist, that's what you do. And every single vintage, every single thing we did, there was a Google Doc, there was a spreadsheet, there was just notes of why. Like, this is why we did this. And then last year I did this, but I did, this year we did something different. So it allowed me to really kind of download what was in his brain. And it was like this ultimate cheat sheet to become like a winemaker pretty quickly. And so I took those notes and I finished that wine, and I made, which I felt to be a pretty darn good Carmenere. I now know Carmenere is not a favorite varietal of mine. It's a good wine, but it just doesn't hit my palate. But that's neither here nor there. That was part of the experimenting of why. There was a reason why we picked Carmenere. Is like, we never really had that before. Let's make it. That's part of that kind of curiosity and what ifs, and that's kind of where some of that kind of helps the foundation of what I do today. And then I decided I wanted to keep going, and I wanted to push some of the boundaries of what we had been doing. And so I started making some whites and rosés, because those weren't necessarily my dad's favorites. So started doing that. And then I got into more and more and learning, and after downloading into my brain all of his notes and all of his books that had highlighting and notes in the sides and the margins, going through that, I kept going more and more, and being part of joined the Portland Winemakers Club here in town, and met more winemakers and kind of expanded my knowledge base and the amount of wines that I was doing, experimenting with, pushing my boundaries of my knowledge, and wanting to kind of solve that problem of why did some years we made really good wine, some years we made kind of shitty wine, some years we made kind of in between, and it was neither here, like, and I didn't necessarily know why, and to know the science behind it is what was, because I'll tell people all the time, it's easy to make good wine. It's really hard to make it consistently good, and to know what's going on with the product that you have, why this cab from 2010 is different than the one from 2016 is mainly because they're different. Mother Nature gave you different things that year, so your ingredients that you're starting with are different. It's the same grape, but it's just completely different, and it's so minuscule little things that you change in the process can make tremendous outcome differences. Like, you could even take the exact same grapes from the same year and just use different yeast, and you'll have completely different wines. And so that spirit of experimentation kind of led me down this road of wanting to know more about the science, way more than my dad and I did. I bought all the pipettes and the burettes, and I started doing all the testing and kind of digging in. And my background is art, and I know we haven't really talked about my background yet, but I'm more the art, design, illustration background, and my dad was the scientist, and kind of as he made wine a little bit more from a kind of a creative space, and that was more of his outlet. And for me, I've kind of gone over to the other side because I wanted to make a good wine consistently. And so that kind of led to me doing some mentoring, having mentorship opportunities here, couple different wineries, and one specifically is Scott at Resolute, Scott Nelson. I found him through the Portland Winemakers Club, and he had a similar arc as me, as being a home winemaker, making his own winery, and then now he's got his own facility out in Hillsborough, and he still has connections to the Winemakers Club. And I just met him one day when he was giving away free carboys and demijohns that he couldn't use anymore, and so I what do you got going on here? He's like, oh, I got my own winery. And I'm like, oh, really? Because I thought he was just a guy in the club. And so then from there I started really helping out as much as I could, spending time at Crush, spending time for racking. Just I wanted to kind of soak in that knowledge and that he was so willing to share, and that kind of gave me some confidence that, oh, here's someone that's kind of coming up from the same background, and doing really, really good wine, and meeting other winemakers in the similar boat as him, and then also going to some of these collectives and seeing some winemakers. And there was one specific moment where my wife and I went to an opening at the AVP Collective, and met a bunch of the winemakers there, and just peppering them with questions. Oh, how'd you get into this? What were your, just because one, curiosity, but also, a little selfishly wanting to know about how they got in. And my wife turned to me and said, you need to do this. You need to do this. And I was kind of in that mind space, but I was like, oh, wait for the kids to get out of, high school, get into college, or wait for something. She said, there's never going to be a perfect time, and she's right. And she said, you're making better wine than some of these people are here. You've got more experience than some of these people. So it kind of brought me back to this memory of when I was younger. I was very entrepreneurial. I still am, but I started making films. I got into comics, and I started making films. I started a couple businesses. I just dove into things, and I think later in life, with family, with less kind of creativity time, I guess, or time to put side projects, I was very hesitant, and she was the one that's no, you need to do that. And so that's what led to me kind of jumping in, and then the next spot was finding a space, and I was helping Scott again do some bottling for a white wine blend that he was working with Meg from Flip Turn, and Kevin from Randon, I can never pronounce it.
La Randonnée.
La Randonnée, thank you. Kevin from La Randonnée. They were doing and so I was just on the line helping them, and kind of talking about my search for a place, and Meg said, I just got an email today from Eric at Ricochet, and I didn't know Ricochet at the time, or Eric, and he said he's moving in a new space, here, and need some people to kind of help fill out the space. And so I fired off an email that afternoon and had a conversation with him. My favorite part about that was Eric. His first question is, "Tell me about yourself." Not about like what's your pedigree in wine, who have you made wine for, or all that. He just like he wanted to know who I was as a person, and that kind of really spoke to me as someone that's caring and interested. And because I always felt like being someone that didn't have professional experience or come up for years of doing that work, or interned, or any of those things, it would be hard to find a space. And so I was kind of worried about that, but after having conversations with him, it really kind of helped me. And he's also feeling me out too, right? Understanding where I'm coming from and where, if I'm gonna not screw up his space, all of that, right? So I had to build some trust on both sides. But that's a very long-winded response to why wine.
It's a fantastic response. I have many questions about it, so we'll come back to you. But let's back up and talk about pre-wine for you. You mentioned your own background. Tell us about where you're born and raised and kind of early life for you.
Yeah, I'm born in Seattle, but I moved. My dad was in grad school. They moved to brief stint in Alton, Illinois, and then moved to the Oregon coast when I was probably two and a half, and then moved to Beaverton when my dad got a job at OHSU when I was in first grade. And so I call myself, I'm not truly native. I wasn't born in the state, but I've been here since I've been able to speak. So I feel like I can call myself a native Oregonian, but and went to school here at PSU. Like I said, I went to school for graphic design, and I have an affinity for illustration and drawing, and that also led to that kind of early part of my career. My brother's a writer, and he used to love to kind of create characters and stories out of some of my sketches, and so we started collaborating early on when I was in high school and started making comic books. And that kind of that same evolution, like I talked about with wine, just kind of expanded from doing little mini comics that we published at Kinko's and took around to then doing full-size comics, finding out where the comics are printed, and then that led to us going to all the conventions and Comic-Con and sharing our wares with people and getting feedback and notoriety, and then eventually getting a publisher from that. Did that for a few years, probably 10 years total from beginning to end. And then that kind of moved into a love of moving pictures, taking the static into film. And so I got my very first job right before I graduated PSU. And so I had like 6 months left, so I was still living at home, and I saved all my money up from this job and decided to go in and make a movie. I was kind of in that same mindset of like Clerks and Kevin Smith, and so I knew that like it can be done. And here's a blueprint of how it's been done. So that's what I ended up doing. My brother came on board, and then during that time, digital video started becoming a thing, just like this guy over here. But the camera was this big at that time. It was put over your shoulder, and just kind of. Again, that was my film school, buying the camera, and just like, you would think, oh, they're going to make a couple short movies. It was like, oh no, we wrote a script for a feature-length movie, let's make a movie. So, and working in comics, there's a lot of kind of crossover of those creatives of people that want to do film. So I was able to like talk to people and get people on board to make it with us, and ended up making three films, a couple of narratives, a couple comedies, narratives, and then I did a documentary of a amazing magician and invention genius man named Jerry Andrus, and I've kind of documented the last year of his life. He was 89, and just kind of like you're doing here today, it was a beautiful experience to be able to be there and kind of hear his story and be able to present that to the world, but also just to be there with him, and that he let us into his life and his space. And I love that. So that was the early part of my career, and so I started working in design, and that moved up to more illustration and design work, and then video work, because of my background in filmmaking, which then led to kind of creative strategy work. So that's kind of where my career path has led me up until here. And then, the next plan is to make this be that next chapter, is like slowly move into that spot where I can be doing this as that next chapter. I have no illusions this is going to be easy. I know it's going to be hard. Making the wine is probably the easiest part. Selling the wine, getting the wine in front of people, and that's what I'm doing now. Is like just trying to tell my story, trying to put my wine in front of people. I know I've got good wine, but there's a lot of great wine out here, right? So it is about just making sure people can have access to it.
That's a very interesting journey. I like that. Tell me about your comic books. What inspired you at that age, and what did you create? So
I did a comic called Mo Investigator the Odd, or it was called Odd Job. Eventually it became called Odd Job. But it was kind of the short pitch was, it's like X-Files meets Scooby-Doo. So it was like, and this was before X-Files existed, is when we started it, and then X-Files came out, so it became easier to tell people about it. But just kind of fun humor comic, and that's kind of, I like comedy, and my brother does too, and so that was kind of the marrying of those two, like unusual cases and then fun stories and to go along with that. And I did that one for the majority of the time, and then I did a couple of graphic novels, more for the emerging. My publisher at the time saw, before it happened, the space of graphic novels for tweens, and like the gap of like books for young adults. And so before there was really, and so we did one called Emily and the Intergalactic Lemonade Stand. And so it was about a young girl that just all she wanted was a pony, but she needed to figure out how to get money to buy a pony. And so it's this kind of farce of a story of her finding working with a intergalactic robot that kind of helps her make her lemonade, but then also within doing that opens up a portal to the fact that there will be aliens trying to come and invade Earth, and so she has to save the day. So basically things that just was like fun to tell and share and draw as well. And so those are the comics that I've made.
And moving from there into film, I'm curious about, you talked about feature length. I mean, you're not just making short films. What were the challenging parts of that, and what did you think of what came out of it?
The challenging parts were, because I was directing, and I was young, my early 20s, and telling people what to do was something that was not easy for me. And a friend of mine who had directed a film before one time took me aside and he said, these people are here, they're not getting paid, you're feeding them. That's the most important thing that I've learned too, is like if people are doing work for free, you feed them, and you honor them and you thank them, but you feed them. He said they're here, and to do something, you need to tell them what to, you just need to they're very willing. It's not like you're telling someone, they're not here for money. They're here for you and your vision and your story. So that once I finally kind of got over the fact that could you please go please do that? It was they're like were bugging me for what to do, and so it was kind of like it was a shift in my mind to okay, how to ask for something, because I'm not really good at asking for help, maybe even now, but that did put me in a better spot. And the challenges. What came out of it, I feel like really helped me understand how important it is to finish what you start. There were so many filmmakers that were they had grand plans and grand visions that I would help out on their projects, and the movies would never come out, they would never be finished, and I feel it's very important, especially people that are giving their time to you and they believe in your vision, that you need to honor that with an end product, a completed thing. And yes, it may not be exactly what you wanted it to be, or it's not as, you wanted to be this, and it didn't necessarily become that, and you maybe feel ashamed or you're not happy with it. Still, you made something beautiful by everybody coming together to do something. And so I think I feel like in every other endeavor since then, it's been part of my understanding is like I need to be able to finish kind of what I started in doing that. And that kind of helped me push through on the wine when there were times where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, or what's the next way to figure out. And I kept coming back to this mantra of like, it's not rocket science. There's somebody doing this has been made for thousands of years. And there's so many people in the valley here that are willing and they're willing to share their information, their knowledge, and help you out. That like all you got to do is find the right person, and ask them, and like you're not like. And so that kind of whenever there was times that I was down or I don't think I could do it, I was like, okay, well I know. Scott has done this, or Eric, or any of those people know how to do this. I just kind of have to ask them, and get over that fear of asking.
So I'm curious about, outside of sort of your dad and his passion for wine, was wine a part of your life in any other way at this point?
No, I didn't come to alcohol at all. I didn't start drinking till I was like maybe 30 or so. Like I just, I had a sweet tooth, and I didn't like alcohol. I still don't necessarily drink to get drunk or anything. I drink out of enjoyment. And so once I finally kind of overcame some of the sweet tooth, even though the first stuff I was drinking was probably sweet stuff, like wine coolers and sweet crap. And my dad I would always try what he was having and their beers that my brother and my dad would make. And so it was a little bit later in life. And then going on trips, I loved Italy, and so I went for the first time I went to France. I didn't drink. I'm going to go later this summer, and I'll finally get to try wine in France. I didn't drink any wine when I went there the first time, but then getting a little bit more cultured understanding. I remember a specific trip in Spain where they were, sangria. Everyone knows sangria, but everyone was drinking. All the locals were drinking something else, and so I asked them. I guess that's Tinto de Verano, and it's just a different version of a sangria, and kind of bringing that home and enjoying that for the summer. And before making wine, I wanted to kind of learn Italian, because this is around the same time my dad had retired, and I'd heard this idea that learning a language later in your life kind of helps cognitively stay together. So I wanted to learn Italian, but I wrote my mom and my dad in too, because I wanted them to be part of like expanding their brains and kind of keeping it with, and also to do something together. So we found an Italian tutor that would come to our home and teach us Italian. And he's from Italy, southern Italy, and he very quickly became a member of our family, and just he's like a brother to me. His name's Antimo, and my mom and dad became parents, his American parents, and so he's now very much a family member. And after a couple years of learning the language, he said, "I think you're ready to practice, and I want you to come visit my family in southern." So he's in Puglia. He comes from Puglia in southern Italy. And so we did, and we visited his family. It was beautiful. And at that time, I was pretty close to fluent. It's almost all gone. It will come back out when I go, and after, but I haven't been practicing it for 16 years now, 15 years now. So, but it was fun to really go there and be able to speak and talk to it. But more importantly, to meet his family and his friends and the countryside, and go to a place in the world where not a lot of Americans go. Like if you spoke English in Manduria, where he's from, in southern Italy, like you turn heads, because they're like, oh wow. Well, since then maybe a little bit more, but of travelers, but mostly all Germans will come down there. Like the beautiful coasts, beach. It's where a lot of Italians go to beach in August. And his dad is a farmer and grows Primitivo, and they've grown Primitivo in their family for many, many years. And I remember very distinctly. In Italy, the culture, especially southern Italy, the culture is you're a farmer. You make your grapes, you sell your grapes. There's no necessarily as much entrepreneur like I'm going to make my own wine, but everyone will keep some of their own grapes to make their own personal wine. And so I got to drink his dad's wine, and so I have this very nostalgic feel for this. Probably not because it was slightly sweet, not very. Not the greatest wine in the world, but like at that point in time, just like that connection to that story, it was like just loved it and just wanted to learn more about the grapes of the region and more of that. And so that was another part of that story and that journey that I could kind of recall back on when we were making wine together with my dad. And yeah. So eventually, I'm doing Rhone varietals now, but eventually part of that, it's more story based. I want to do a Primitivo. I want to do a cab because that was my dad's favorite. So that's on the road in the future.
So I'm curious, as you were working with your dad, you mentioned that it was his sort of artistic outlet, and for you sort of started diving into the scientific side. I'm curious about the learning the scientific part of winemaking. What surprised you, or what were the obstacles for you as you started to kind of dig into answering the question of why wines are different year to year, and why things are affected the way they are?
Yeah, I took the Winemaker magazine has an annual conference, and a couple years ago it was in Eugene, and I took their it was part of the pre-day, like a 5-hour like scientific principles kind of class with Chick Brenneman, and him and I can't remember his wife's name, but she's a scientist as well, and they did a really good job of explaining the chemistry of testing for acid and pH and your SO2 levels, and kind of on the higher level side of, but also the kind of the underlying principles. And so for me, I don't dig super deep into the weeds. Like I love just enough of cause and effect and of why we're doing this is this, but I don't know I can't explain all the levels below that. And I went to a couple of talks there from someone that was deep diving on the chemistry, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like going way over my head. If that's what I need to learn, like, screw it, I'll pay someone to do that. But it is. So the correlation between pH and TA, and why you would want one over the other versus in specific varietals. So I'm kind of on that level, and there's a author, Daniel Pambianchi, who has a really good books about the chemistry of winemaking, and kind of that level for me of chemistry, and so mainly too, I think one of the things, learning how to fix things when they start going bad it's kind of an important thing to do too, and that was part of that experience of learning winemaking. It's not all going to be perfect, and so learn how to rectify something if you can, and most of the time I was able to understand, and then that also was a part of me learning that is like, oh, that's why that one a few years ago, before I knew any of this, didn't necessarily go as well as I wanted, because now I know, like, oh, I wasn't keeping up on my SO2 management, so I got a little bit of, rotten egg smell in there, a little smell in there, and now I know how, if I get into that spot, how to monitor and fix it. And I was surprised, not the right word, but I did notice that as I was making wine and seeing how other winemakers were doing it, a lot were just sending stuff out to the labs and not necessarily doing stuff on their own. And so I think because of my experience of just doing some of that was helpful for me to really kind of know what's going on with the wine, and then taking stuff out to the labs when I really needed to or wanted a more deep dive, but I also had the skill set and ability to do it on my own in the moment rather than sending stuff out.
So I'm curious about, you mentioned like you worked with your dad for a while, and it was sort of just like a fun experience for you, and you weren't necessarily retaining a whole lot. So I'm curious about what you remember from that sort of pre-knowledge experience versus after you started to sort of download. What at that time, what was exciting about it to you? What was interesting about winemaking to you? Was it purely just to spend time with your dad, or were there other parts of it as well?
I loved seeing him light up when we would, taste the wine, either finished wine or as it was going. And I love the cyclical nature of it. So, every in the fall we would buy some new grapes, and then we would be ready to be bottling last year's, because after about a year in bottle or year in carboy, then it's going to go to bottle. So there was this cyclical nature, and it wasn't a lot of. So there's a fall moment, and then kind of maintenance phases that we didn't necessarily need to get together for. So maybe a couple times a year we would get together and we would rack the wine out and clean it and rack back in. So it wasn't a lot of like. It was easy touch at this point in time, where I was like, but just working together, and I got to see him regularly because I lived nearby. But those moments that we would just go off into his garage and just kind of tinker with and explain and see if there was anything that we needed to fix, or like he would pull out the books and he's like, okay, this is what we did and this is what I'm thinking I want to do this year, and like hearing him talk about it and seeing him engaged and excited about it is what kind of was really fun for me.
So tell me about the notebooks, and tell me about diving into those.
It was basically mostly digital, besides the actual books that he wrote on that had also notes of paper in them as well. And going through the Google Docs and just kind of reading was like this. Almost these aha moments of like, oh, that's why we were doing what we were doing, or that like that's when I started making connections. And things started clicking at a certain level, but it also changed once I started making wine myself. I'm like trying to trust myself into, is that what we were doing, or why, or how we were doing it, or remind myself. But no, it was, it was emotional, definitely, to kind of be reading those, and because it's written in his language, and it's written. Mostly, as a scientist, it wasn't like it was just there was just line and no like connection to it. There was like his personality is in it as well, but they're not verbose, but like a paragraph each time we touch the wine would be like 2 or 3 sentences, and so it is definitely it allows me to kind of be in the moment with him, and I feel like I'm in present tense with him. When I go through those things, yeah, and so I'm slightly welling up now, because it is powerful, yeah. And I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be making wine if he was still around, and I would give all that up, but that's not life, and so it definitely is something that is important to me to continue on. Not that he asked for it, but it allows that connection to keep coming through. Keeps it alive, I guess. Yeah.
So as you started to work with other people, especially you mentioned Scott and others in the industry, tell me about what you started to learn about kind of, I guess, the parts of winemaking you hadn't seen before, the parts of the year you hadn't been involved with. Were there things that engaged you at that point, or that excited you to try?
Yeah, no, even before I started doing professionally, going to see what it's like to bring the grapes in, to sort them out, to learn what we're looking for and what we're trying to remove from the grapes, and I would always kind of try to like respectfully throw enough questions where I'm not bugging someone, but like, oh, why are we doing this, or how? And so the learning process for working with different winemakers is great too, because Scott is a former like engineer. He's got a very set way to do it. Eric has a very set way he's doing it, and seeing how other winemakers here in the facility, they're doing things differently that they learn from their spot. So like, I really love being able to kind of pick and choose from those, like what makes sense to me as a winemaker. Learned very early on that winemaking is 90% cleaning. And I'm sure you've heard that before with all your questions here, is like, it is, and how important that is. And so that's been kind of, I drilled in to make sure that like that. And so like, I wasn't at my homework, I wasn't as clean. I was like, I kept clean, but like not like super clean. And then I remember reusing corks one year, because I just had them, or no, someone had, I bought some bottles from someone, and they had extra corks, so I just put them in that year in my Viognier that I made, and they got cork taint, and I wasn't, because I didn't even know how old they were, where they come from. I didn't know the story. So like now, so like that was one of those learnings of like, I had a little bit of my own personal wine, a couple cases of Viognier that was beautiful wine that like started going bad on me after about a month in bottle. And then I tried an experiment. It was fun. It was like, so I read, how do I try to fix cork taint? And someone said, you put cellophane, wrap it up, and just throw it and throw the wine over it, and I don't know the chemistry behind it. Again, it's one of those things I just read about. And so I tried it, and it really pulled almost the majority of all, and if not all of the cork taint. I pulled some flavor out of the wine, but I was like, it was undrinkable before. Now it's like, oh, it's a nice wine, not as good. I'm not going to share it. I'm not going to like pour it for a friend as an example of my wine, but it's still not a bad white wine. But like, it's one of those little learning experiments and things. But yeah, not to cheap out on corks. Make sure everything's clean. But yeah, back to that original point of like the working with crush, working with racking, working with barrels more so, because I have come from this background of carboys and demijohns and smaller scale. So like what it's like to make sure that those things are prepped and ready and cleaned. And so that's all of these things are just fueling my excitement and engagement more. Like I want to keep learning. I want to keep doing more. I had a day, it was a 20-hour day, because I'm an hour here from the winery, so 18-hour day in the winery. It just needed to get done. And when you're a winemaker and you have other things in life, you got to put it in weekends and times when you can make available. And so, but I drove home at like 3 a.m, and I still had a little trouble getting to sleep because my mind was still going. I was like, my body was exhausted, my feet were killing me, but I was not like frustrated or mad. I was still engaged and excited and wanting to like, it wasn't a discouraging thing to me, like, oh, I don't ever want to do that again. It was just like, no, that was just a long day, but it was a day, and I got the things done that I wanted to and needed to get done, and so I'm just ready to get back at it the next day.
So you mentioned the kind of the aha moment of starting Copious and having your wife suggest it and encourage you to do it. Tell me about the logistics. You mentioned how you found the space. Tell me about the logistics of deciding on the rest of it, of starting to come up with what you were going to present and how you were going to present it.
Definitely. So important to me was having kind of a partner to help support in this endeavor. So I've identified a friend named Rob in the Winemakers Club, and he's also a winemaker here now as well. In kind of the same boat as me, making really good wine for over 10 years, and so we kind of went in together, bought grapes together, and so we have our own separate brands, our own wine, but we kind of had each other's backs. So we still do. We're like here helping support each other. He has his own brand, I have my own brand, but we bought the grapes together. And our wines are different, but similar because they're the same grapes. And so that was really instrumental to me to like, okay, I've got someone that I'm not just in my own head perseverating on an idea. Did I do it right or wrong? Like, hey, what do you think about this? Is this okay? Like someone, and so I can bug him more than I can like, a mentor or Eric or someone, other winemakers, because we're kind of like making sure, like, is this all right? Or is this the way we're supposed to be doing it? Or so bouncing, it's able to kind of speak a little more freely and open, and so that was instrumental to get to the next step. I mean, and then it was finding what to make, and Pinot is king here, and there's so much Pinot around me right now that it's really going to be hard to stand out. Even if you make the best Pinot in the world, you're still going to have a hard time getting people to notice you. And at the end of the day, Pinot's not a wine that I love. I like Pinot, but to my palate, it's not my favorite red wine. So there's no real connection for me to like, oh, I really want to make it because I love it, and it's going to be hard to stand out. So, and then you'll see other winemakers who go to the complete opposite and say, we're making the big bold reds, and we're making those. And when you go to these kind of winemaker or wine events, you'll see both of those spectrums and people trying to stand out in various ways. And so I felt like there was a space in between, and Rhone varietals, which is I'm focusing on right now, is that kind of flavor profile that's in between a Pinot and a big bold red, and finding that homage to actually they're Rhone varietals but grown in the Rhone style. So in Columbia Valley AVA, these are Horse Heaven Hills AVA and Columbia Valley AVA, where the whites and rosé from my first vintage are from Alexandria Nicole at Destiny Ridge Vineyard and Knox Road Vineyard just down the road. Their growing conditions are very similar to Rhone in southern France, and so wanting to honor that tradition of how those wines are made, because a Viognier made there in my Viognier style versus one that's grown in the Willamette Valley cold weather are completely different styles of wine. My mentor Scott makes a Viognier that's the polar opposite of mine. It is bright, crisp, light, green apple, and mine is more bold, and stone fruit and vanilla. Like it's like they're and high alcohol. Not so they're on this in the spectrum. And that's great. Both of them are amazing to I like all kinds of wines, but I think I can stand out a little bit more having something like that. So that's where I kind of came from to that point. And then finding those vineyard partners that are doing it's kind of similar to the style in France. So like a late harvest on the whites. The rosé was obviously we wanted a bright rosé, so that was an early harvest. But late harvest, so allowing it to have a little bit more alcohol, but a little more complexity because it sits on the vines about a month longer, and then it gets into this winery in October when the temperatures start dropping, and the fermentation took 2.5 months because it was so cold in here. So that's also a very like I wasn't necessarily thinking about that when I came in, but it is a great benefit. The aromatics on the whites are much better because it took so much longer. Again, another one of those chemistry things. I know those things to be true. I couldn't tell you exactly why, but the exact science behind why a longer fermentation preserves but I do know that to be true. So that's kind of my level of science. And so some of those happy accidents, and Eric always talks about like sometimes the wine makes the decision for you, and like putting them in oak barrels because there's limited space in this facility to not go up. If you can't go up, then you're taking up a lot of footprint. So it wasn't initially part of my decision to make the wines, but because you don't often see whites in neutral barrels. These are completely neutral barrels, but it adds a lot more mouthfeel, a lot more creaminess, some kind of hint of maybe vanilla on the nose because of the way it's aging, and again, closer to some of the French style of winemaking. So it was a choice that wasn't initially part of the plan, but now will be like a signature of what I want to do moving forward. It's a little bit more work, a little bit more effort, especially now there's no wine in them. I got to keep them up during the off season. But I think it's important to kind of keep, because I really love how it turned out.
So you mentioned where the name Copious came from, and it's obviously a perfect name for that. I'm curious about, tell me about the rest of the design. Obviously, with your artistic background, you must have had a vision for what you wanted to do. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, as a designer, I spent a fair amount of time coming up with ideas what that visual representation could be. And my design style is very similar to my winemaking style. It's story-based, it's connection. And as a designer, I always graphic design is a utile art. It's meant to do something. It's not just to look pretty. Looking pretty to me is art that goes on a wall. So in design, you either want someone to buy your product, you want someone to push that button, you want somebody to know that your brand exists. And how do you do that? And so I took it as if I was pitching to a client who was myself, and came up with a strategy deck of why one strategy versus the other, and then I showed that to friends and family, and it kind of honed in. But at the end of the day, it was my choice. And so, to me, I want to honor that spark of curiosity that my dad and I had when we were making wine, and so with Copious, I kind of found the exclamation point switching to the I kind of created this level of surprise and intrigue, and just like what's that doing there, and a little bit of almost like a pop of excitement. And so once I found that, it kind of helped me kind of come up with a label design where I guess I can point to it right here. The exclamation point bifurcates the label, and so the design strategy is the singular shape that's behind is the product. It is the grape that no matter what, it's always going to kind of be the same, and each side of it is how my dad made wine, and so the shape is the same, but the all the pieces and design elements on it are different, and that represents how I make wine and how my dad make wine. And so it's kind of like honoring those two things together with how we would make the same grape. And so it's kind of that connection to that. And so you don't need to know that when you look at it, but also I think to me that's the story that I was connecting to, and that made the design sing more. It gives more life to it when I'm creating the design. And when people look at it like, oh, I really like that, they don't even need to know that story to know that they like the label. And so that's for my design background is I make a better design when I can connect it to something, and that connection then connects up to the strategy of what we're trying to do with the brand. And so that's how I came up with it. And then the backs of the labels, they're funny little stories and kind of irreverent takes, mainly because I was doing a bunch of research on wine labels, and the back of wine labels are so boring and usually an afterthought, and almost every single brand has the exact same back. Here's a little history about us. And marketing 101 is people don't want to know about you, they want to know about themselves. They want to know why should I pick up this bottle of wine? Why me? And so I decided to put something on there that was kind of fun, a little different, and get someone to maybe read it. If they're going to look at it read it, and then also talk to them a little bit about why you might want this wine.
So let's take the Viognier for example. Tell me about, you mentioned the two different sides representing your approach and your dad's approach. Tell us about the symbolism on the Viognier and how it represents those two different sides.
Well, yeah. So again, kind of coming back to that original point of my dad expressing the style of making his wine was kind of more in that kind of that creative release for him, and me being on the more science. So it's kind of on that level, how I would do things differently now than the one he did. He never made a Viognier because it being a white, but it's kind of more conceptual and how we would have made it if he were still today, and based off of how he was making wine and how I'm making wine now. So I generally, the things that are a little bit more flourishy or curved or just a little bit less straight edged are actually his side, which most people would think that would be my side. And mine are usually the other side that's a little more straight laced because it's me. And that's just like in my head how I'm designing it, that it's not always a 1-to-1 ratio, but yeah, it's like.
So after all of the effort and the energy to go into this, tell me about your first release and having it in front of people now. How does it feel? How has it gone?
It feels amazing. I had basically a friends and family open house at my house to kind of release the wine, and invited people from my past that I used to work with and knew that I was making wine that I had kind of like gotten out of touch with, and friends and family and friends of friends. It's like, hey, if you got friends that want wine or know wine, bring them along. So about 75 people come through, and I didn't stop talking the whole day and pouring. It filled me with joy, mainly, and relief, because I knew I had good wine, but I hadn't really served it for people yet. I've done barrel tastings. I'd actually taken it from the barrel and shared it with customers that were here and stuff, and had good responses, good reactions. But these were people that had known my journey and knew where I had come from, and were there to support me, and I just love being able to see these people that I hadn't seen in a long time and get to connect with again. But there was this specific taste that someone would taste, and there was this. I never called it out or anything, but I know it was this level of relief on their end of like, like this is good, like this is good, and almost this relief of like, I don't have to buy a bottle of crappy wine to support you, because it was just like, yeah, and it was like I thought that was the funniest thing to myself. I was just like, it was a very common thing of people that like they didn't know, like they didn't know what to expect, and they were impressed and pleasantly surprised, but they weren't saying that. They were just like, because they didn't, but it was great, and the good feedback, and again the relief was like, I just didn't want to fuck it up. Like, I've been doing this for so long. It seemed like so long, but to get there was a long journey. But like, I wanted to honor the tradition of that story that had come along, and to be able to do that and serve really good wine to the people that have been there the most for me was very important. And even if they didn't like the wine as much, or if they were faking it or whatever, that's fine. I know that it was something that I'll never forget. Yeah.
Very relieved they didn't have to humor you and tell you lie to your face about it. That's a good. I like that. I love that.
Yeah, and since then it's been different level. Like that's early, right? I released the wine in mid-May, so it's still like a month ago, and have a couple opportunities now to. So, like there's two levels of it, right? There was that day that was amazing, and then the next morning me feeling down because. That's the best day I'm ever gonna have, right? I'm never gonna sell that much again, or that much, like, so it's like almost being down because of it, and then having another day where I didn't sell as much as I would have liked, but had really good feedback and good responses. I also know the people that are around me were not selling well either, so it wasn't necessarily a me thing. And then being down because I'm never going to be able to sell this wine. So like it's the stories you tell yourself. And then had an event last week at my mentor's winery, and kind of did a little takeover and sold like way more than I would have expected, and had some really good feedback from people that didn't know me at all, didn't know anything about my wines, and just were like just really impressed, and bought a lot of wine, and these were good wine drinkers that are discerning, they know good wine, and so that kind of fueled me of like, oh wow, like that, and so I know there's going to be ebbs and flows, and the last couple weeks have been me going out and just trying to get my wine in front of people and do pours for all kinds of bottle shops and restaurants, and just trying to get people, introduce myself and expand. And so that's been it's been a really good response and good feedback, and I'm getting out there and just trying to kind of do what I did when I was trying to find a space, just kind of networking and connecting and sharing.
So what is it like to launch a wine brand right now? How does it feel in the marketplace? How does it feel being around people who are buying wine?
It's interesting spot, to say the least. There's all, the articles of the doom and gloom, and it's hard not to read those and get super. I know it's going to be a hard space. Again, I'm not doing this because I want to start making money right away. I'm going to be slowly growing this brand, and that's my goal, is to not I need to start pulling money right away into this. Is I want to nurture this along. So I have that in the back of my head of okay, that's an important thing to think about. And I've talked with some other winemakers, and the feeling is that a couplefold of a lot of the doom and gloom is kind of coming from the market that's much larger producers that are selling lower price point wines. There's still a market, and people are still doing fine selling wines that are artisanal style wines that are a little higher price point, but they're more local and more connected to the winemaker. But at the same time, wine has never, for almost its entire existence, had to really work hard at selling itself. It's wine. And so I think also coming from the top of those wineries that are having hard times, have never really had to work hard at marketing and selling and getting their wine. And you see examples of other alcohols, other brands, other liquors, and other places that have been doing this and doing this well for the last 10, 20 years. And so I think wine is going to need to wake up, find out who their target audience is. They're going to find out how to speak to them, and then how to get their wine in front of them. And so I feel from a marketing angle, and my background in marketing from design is helpful in that regard. And so I'm slightly optimistic on my side that I think that this is something that I can do, that I'm not fooling myself that there's people making better wine, there's people making great wine out here that are not selling, and it isn't necessarily always about the wine. So there's more to think about, more to concentrate on than just making great wine. And so I've got a more optimistic point of view on it, and I think we'll see how it goes. I feel yes, that there's some concern with younger generations not drinking as much wine, but when I hear that, I also know most of the time over the last 50 years, those younger generation people were not drinking wine to begin with. Wine is usually something you come into, and that's why right now millennials are the number one buyers over Gen X and baby boomers now, because they're coming into that age. And so I'm less concerned about some of those stories, even though if they continue the trend of not drinking, then that might be problematic in 10 years, 10, 15 years. But I feel that some of the things are a little bit overblown. Is probably not the right word, but it's still, it's not scaring me not enough to go into it, right? But so that's kind of where my thoughts are on it. And there's the concerns too right now from a global warming perspective of what's going to happen. I think that's, to me, on the scarier side of what the product coming in is going to do. Oregon might become a warm weather climate region in no time. My friend just sent me a text today about the possible wildfires that are going to be. This should be a warm, hot summer, and we got lucky last year. I think I've heard of very few wineries having issues last year, and so. But we're also learning a lot more on that in the science. Oregon State down the road in Corvallis has been doing a lot of research on how to deal with smoke taint. So there'll be something to combat that, but that's still not. It's not where we want to be.
So I'm curious about, as you started to meet people in the Oregon wine industry, tell me about your kind of initial impressions of the industry, of the people in it, the wines that are being made here, and how, if at all, has that changed in the time you've spent around the industry?
Of course, my time has been short, so I haven't noticed change, but I have been so grateful for the community here in the Northwest for winemaking. Everyone is so willing and giving of information that it just feels like a big club that we're all in, and we're all helping each other out. I've heard stories beyond just me, other winemakers that were breaking into the industry and how they've been helped along, and it very much feels like a pay it forward situation. Eric, who runs Ricochet here, and the Indie Wine Mixer, and is doing tremendous amount of work to help support winemakers that are just starting up, because that's how he got his start, and that's how he is as a human, and very much the idea of, a rising tide lifts all boats. Like, I haven't really noticed any competition of to the point where people selling us the grapes were telling us exactly how they make their wine. This is exactly what I do, right? And not that we did it that way, but it was great knowledge to understand some of this stuff, and the fact that a lot of winemakers know that you can do the exact same thing and it will taste completely different. And so there is, there's knowledge in knowing that there is a craft of how wine is made that's so individual to the space, the literal space that it's made in, the timing of how you treat things, the temperature of how things are, that wine will never taste the same. And so I could copy exactly how someone else makes a wine, and when you try them, they'll be different. They'll taste different. And so there's an individuality to that, and individuality to the producer themselves as a winemaker. And so I think that kind of fuels a little bit of it, that we're not competing right next, with the same people. But also, I think it goes beyond that. I think it's just, hopefully, I've heard this has happened in Sonoma back in the day, and it kind of went away when the money came in, is what I've heard. But I'm not noticing any of that right now, anything. It's like people so giving and open with their, that it's almost like anti-competitive. And I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's that level of people are seeing other people have higher, from a sales perspective. I think you might start seeing some I wish I could be doing more. I see them making them out there, and that might be it. But that's also very individual in terms of personality of the human and how they're getting out into the world. And that level of, because all of it is mostly fueled by social media now, and so how you get to know about a wine is pretty much how you get out into the world. And some people are.
So with that said, as you look ahead for Oregon's future specifically, what do you hope for, and are there things that you're? I mean, obviously you mentioned climate change already. Are there any other things that you're fearful of as you look ahead?
Yeah, hopeful is an interesting one, because I know what we are most well known for, came onto the map for with Pinot. And that's far from what I make, but from a perspective of living here and going out and wine tasting, I love the options and what we have here, and it seems like we now have that acceptance as being one of the best in the world. And I feel like we're starting to see expansion upon that with from some different varietals. So what I would love to see is what's that next level of variety that's making it to the point where we can be well known for this whatever that varietal may be, because what I think some customers, some people, the experience is if you go wine tasting here, you can go to 4 different places, maybe drink 20 different Pinots, and then they'll maybe throw a Chardonnay or like a Rosé in there. So I would love that experience to be shifted a little bit so there's more offerings, right? And that's one that's, well, it's planted there, so it's going to take time to figure out what are those other varietals. But whenever I go out wine tasting, I want to make sure I find some wineries that have other offerings besides just Pinot, because I want some change in my palate, and then your palate just gets blown on when you're just drinking the same varietal 15 times. So I like variety. So, and there's places like here at Eric making tons of different varietals. He makes a great Pinot as well, and but he has those options. And I think that's also something that younger generation wine drinkers are interested in, having a little bit more variety, and also it's bearing out that they're not really caring about like varietal. They just want something new and different. So if you put a Viognier in front of them, or if you put a Marsanne Roussanne Viognier, or like a white blend that they haven't heard of before, they don't. They want what's it taste like? What's the experience that I'm having, rather than like I'm looking for this grape, and this grape. I think the information is getting out to the point where they're a little less worried about that, or concerned about terroir, or any of those things. They're just like, well, what they're willing to spend money, but what they want good wine, and they want good options, and they want good, different choices. So yeah, I think that would be what I would hope for. What I worried about definitely the weather is, to me, is, and I guess if I worry, I'm not worried that it's happening, but I don't want it to happen. It would be like to see that change in personality of openness and giving that we have here. I'm not seeing that at all, but that would be something that would be very sad. I truly envision as part of my plan as I move forward to do the exact same things to help the people that are coming from behind, and hopefully we'll get to the point where we can start. And you're starting to see this now too, more diversity in people that are making the wine.
Mm-hmm. So you talked a little earlier about the future for your brand. Obviously, you just one vintage in here, and some other things you want to make. So tell me about, as you look ahead, what would be, how would you look back and say Copious was successful? What are the markers you're looking for that would make this a success?
How far ahead are we?
As far as you want to look.
What would make it a success to me is, it's interesting. My 16-year-old son, he was asked by his grandfather the other day what he wanted to do. Like, he asked, where are you going to be in 20 years, I think. And the kids all had their responses. And he said, like, I want to maybe someday take over the wine thing. And so to me, that, I guess, selfishly would be this connection to my grandfather, who was their favorite person in the world. And so that would be that. And to do that would be, for me right now, to continue this passion to start making reds as well, expanding upon that. I want to really kind of keep honoring that home winemaking style of curiosity and making new things. I don't want to just find these three and like, oh, these are great, I'm going to try to make these every year. What I want to do is try experimental stuff that, to be able to have the space and freedom, financial freedom, to be able to say, oh, I need to play with this stuff, and I would love to have like almost like a side, maybe not even label, but stuff that's just for members or something like that, like here, and then tasting it and trying it and seeing like, oh, this is really connecting with people, and then that can be now folded into the main winery or something like. So just to honor the level of curiosity and because for me, I'm most happy when I'm making and creating, doing and starting something new. I don't want to just do variations of a theme and just find something that works and just only do that. I want to keep learning and keep trying. And so I think keep doing that and expanding and finding what works and and then finding what doesn't work. Because to me, when I was working as a creative director, I'd always tell my designers, like, the best way to find out what works is find out what doesn't work. And so just really kind of refining and honing down and experimenting and trying and slowly expanding the winery to then, ultimately someday maybe my son will take over.
Mm-hmm.
and then I can sit back and let him do the work. Because starting a winery at 50, I'll be 50 this year, it's going to be heavy lifting stuff in no time.
Is there anything else that you mentioned Primitivo, you mentioned Cab? Is there anything else that you want to for sure try and make?
I really want to honor the Rhone stuff still, and that kind of idea of finding stuff in between with the GSM. And so I really love a well-crafted red GSM. For me and my palate, Mourvèdre heavy. So I would basically be an MGS is what I prefer in my blending trials, and so that's what I want to kind of bring to the table. That will probably be the first of the reds that I continue on with, and then probably then the Cab and the Primitivo, just kind of the story-based stuff. Like I don't want to be just known for just Rhones, but just like what those connections, and I feel like the brand is about story and connections, so it makes sense to make some of those, and then. I think that's where I want to really push as I move forward, is expand the reds. I love Grenache Rosé, but I also really love Syrah Rosé. To me, those are my two favorites, and so I might want to experiment that as well, and maybe have those side by side, or because I'm about ready to buy grapes for this coming year, and I'm getting, people are really loving the rosé, and I'm like, well, I wanted to make a Syrah one, but then I don't want to not offer what people are really liking now, and so, but I don't know if I'm in the space right now to carry two rosés at this point in time at the size without having a tasting room. So, those are the decisions right now. Like as a winemaker now, as a business owner, as a marketer, right? It's like trying to. I was telling someone the other day, like, sometime eventually I'll get there, but almost every single day there's a new thing to figure out. So everything is novel right now. It's everything, and doing that takes a lot longer to figure out, because I want to make sure I'm doing it right. I'm doing my research on it. So like everything seems like, it's taking so long to do those things because I've never done them before. And so the business part of it it's just as thrilling and exciting to me, but it is definitely a little bit scarier in terms of like how I'm going to figure out to sell the wine and get it out there. But like, I'm having really good success at meeting people and sharing the wine, so I'm just going to keep doing that. And again, back to that idea of like, I'm not inventing the wheel. I've got good wine. I just got to get in front of people and see what they say.
All right, so last question for you. I haven't asked this one in a while, so I'm curious your answer on this. Someone takes a sip of wine you've made. What is the best reaction? What is the thing you really hope that they are how they react? Oh, well, I mean, obviously, I talked about that one reaction earlier of relief, I guess. No, but this is, I think, to me, it kind of comes back to what that story that I told my dad. There's like this twinkle of like in the eye of just like satisfaction and wonder. And for me, like, because I'm making wines that are a little bit different than what you get here in the valley, in the Willamette Valley, is a little bit of surprise too. Just a little like, because I've had multiple people try my Viognier, and they kind of already came in saying, I'm not the biggest Viognier fan, and there's that level of surprise of like, there's a different way to make this. And so I think that like, hopefully that answers your question there. Yeah, to me, of like trying to open up their eyes to something that is a little bit different than what they might be used to having here. Definitely, fantastic answer. All right, all the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything we didn't cover today that you were hoping to cover? No, I thank you for being here and opening up eyes to your listeners and your viewers about what's going on here in Oregon and Washington. Like of the makers and the small producers and people that are really working hard to do something special. And I think it's really good for what you're doing. And so thank you very much. Actually, thank you. You're welcome. That's really nice of you to say. Thank you so much for sharing your time today, sharing your story, sharing your beautiful labels over here with us as well. And I'm glad when you get to call yourself a winemaker now, you don't have to be bashful about it anymore. I like that. That's good. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, and we'll let you off the hook. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.